9. Ben Gould. After meeting on the Plenty of Fish dating service in 2018, British couple Ben Gould and Hayley Smith started dating and eventually moved in together. The next year, Hayley found out that Ben had been living with his ex when they first met, and she pumped the brakes on what had initially seemed like a budding romance. She kicked Ben out to think things through, but he didn't exactly go away quietly. Desperate to continue their relationship, Gould stalked Smith relentlessly over the phone and in real life. He followed her, broke into her camper, and called and messaged her endlessly. Fearing for her children's safety, Hayley packed up all of their belongings and went to stay with various friends and relatives. But Ben somehow kept figuring out where they were staying and sending her pictures of whatever home she was in at the time. Hayley reported the unwanted contact and a warrant was soon issued for Ben's arrest, but police didn't find him at his listed address in Cornwall. One day, he sent Hayley a text saying he was watching her from inside her house. Police searched but couldn't find him, so they eventually left. 10 days later, officers returned and found Ben inside Hayley's attic. He pleaded guilty to stalking but managed to avoid any prison time. Hayley was granted a 3-year protection order, but said it wasn't enough considering the severe psychological trauma he put her through. 8. Ezekiel Zayas. Brittany and James Campbell returned home to Honolulu with their children in 2019 after a week-long vacation and saw one of their bikes sitting outside, which was odd since they hadn't left it there before leaving. When James tried to open the front door, a man calmly pulled it shut and told him, "This is not your home." Brittany immediately called 911 while James went inside with a sledgehammer to get the intruder to leave. Police identified the suspect as 23-year-old Ezekiel Zayas and charged him in connection to the home invasion. In the meantime, the Campbells found their home in a state of complete disarray. They also found a series of disturbing diary entries and videos on one of their laptops. The entries included personal details, like the family's medical information, making it clear that their unwelcome guest had been living in the house since before they even left for their trip. He left multiple knives next to the computer, along with a manifesto containing gruesome plans to perform invasive medical experiments on the family. Brittany and James started to remember strange incidents that had happened in recent months, including a webcam and other items that disappeared from the homes, doors that were unexplainably left open, and the family dog barking for what seemed like no reason at all. While sharing their story on the Lifetime series Frogging, Hide Her in My House, the couple said they weren't sure exactly how long Zayas was hiding in their house. Zayas was charged in an unrelated murder case after being removed from the property and is now at a state-run mental facility after being deemed incompetent for trial. At the very least, the Campbells don't have to worry about him wandering around, but they were so traumatized by his intrusion that they sold their house and started over elsewhere. 7. Extra baggage. A New Zealand family bought a trailer full of items from a storage facility auction in 2022 and got home to see a gruesome discovery. While unloading the bin, they were overcome by a putrid smell. After some digging, they found suitcases filled with human remains. The smell was so strong that neighbors also noticed it. One resident who worked at a crematorium recognized the stench as decomposing human flesh. Another thought the odor belonged to maybe a dead cat, but they never thought it would be human. Overwhelmed by the resulting media attention, the family went to stay with a relative. Sympathetic community members called on anyone with information about the remains to step forward. It was initially unclear how many bodies were inside the luggage. Authorities ultimately determined that the remains belonged to 2 young individuals who had been hidden inside the suitcases for as many as 3 to 4 years. The mother of the deceased was extradited from South Korea to New Zealand, where she now faces 2 murder charges. As of today, most of the details about the case are kept from the public. If convicted, the suspect could face life in prison, which comes with a minimum of 10 years. 6. The disappearance of George Smith IV. Newlyweds George and Jennifer Smith set out for their honeymoon in 2005 and went on a 12-day Mediterranean cruise. Sadly, George vanished after getting extremely drunk at the ship's casino one night. The next morning, an overhang beneath the balcony of the couple's cabin was found covered in blood. 4 young men George was seen hanging out with before he disappeared told authorities that they helped him get to his room because he was too drunk to get there alone. They said they put him in bed, he thanked them, and they left. nothing else. And while their version of events has been subjected to severe scrutiny, none of them were ever formally charged. Jennifer also fell under suspicion, but was cleared of any and all wrongdoing. Authorities have since entertained many theories, including the possibility that George simply fell overboard while intoxicated. They've also considered that he might have been robbed or gotten into a disagreement that suddenly turned violent. His body was never found, and the FBI closed its investigation into the case back in 2015. In 2020, one of the men who spent time with George on the ship, Gregory Rosenberg, was executed in his driveway by an unknown assassin who's still at large. Investigators believe Rosenberg's murder may have been an ordered hit, and that it may be somehow related to George's disappearance. 5. The Girl in the Box. 20-year-old Colleen Stam was hitchhiking in Eugene, Oregon in 1977, when a young, nice-looking couple offered her a ride. They had their baby with them, so it seemed like a safe enough idea. The couple, 23-year-old Cameron Hooker and his 19-year-old wife Janice, then held a knife to Colleen's throat once she got into the car and put a heavy box over her head to block all sights and sounds. They initially kept her in their California basement, where they sadistically tortured her. When the Hooker family moved to a trailer, they kept their captive in a coffin-like box beneath their bed for nearly 23 hours a day, typically only letting her out to babysit their 2 children or for a torture session. Cameron told Colleen he was a member of a satanic cult called The Company. He convinced her that they were always watching and had placed recording devices in the home, making her fear that the organization might hurt her family if she tried escaping. Over time, Colleen gained a few privileges. 4 years into her captivity, she was allowed to visit her family by herself. When she did, her loved ones could tell something was wrong based on Colleen's withdrawn behavior and lack of communication. They suspected she'd joined a cult, but were afraid to press for details because they thought it might push her away again. Meanwhile, Colleen was scared to tell them what was happening because she thought the company would find out. In that sense, she was just as much a prisoner psychologically as she was physically. Janice eventually realized that her husband had brainwashed her as well, and in 1984 she helped Colleen escape the home. She eventually testified against Cameron in exchange for an immunity deal, helping to secure a conviction against him for kidnapping. He was later sentenced to 104 years in prison. Cameron was denied parole in 2015 and will only be eligible again in 2030. 4. University of Idaho murders. Early one morning in November 2022, 4 University of Idaho students, Madison Mogan, Kaylee Goncalves, and Zana Canodal, were brutally stabbed to death in their off-campus apartment. Canodal's boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, was also killed in the bloodbath. 2 roommates who slept through the attack were unharmed and called the police when they woke up the next morning to see the carnage. The murder weapon was never found. No suspects have been named and no arrests pursued. Investigators initially said that at least one of the deceased was targeted, but the police then said that they weren't sure if it was a targeted killing or not in the first of many statement reversals they've made during this case. Law enforcement has also received a flood of tips, including speculation that one victim, Kaylee Goncalves, had a stalker before death. So far, detectives haven't verified this claim, but they haven't fully ruled it out either. They've also gone back and forth on whether they believe the public is in danger or not. The 2 surviving roommates are not suspected of being involved at all. The apparent lack of progress in solving this case has led to frustration from university students and family members, as well as allegations that police aren't doing as much as they could to get to the bottom of this tragic mystery. 3. The disappearance of Dr. Chandray Cross. Prominent Florida oncologist Dr. Chandray Cross left Naples on his 33-foot boat named the Vitamin C one afternoon in 2022 and never returned. The US Coast Guard launched a search for the 49-year-old and found his ship off Sanibel Island. But Cross was nowhere to be seen, and after covering a 13,000 square mile area, the Coast Guard suspended the search altogether. Officials urged members of the public to come forward if they knew anything about the doctor's disappearance and send condolences to his family. It's unclear whether Cross was wearing a life jacket out on the water or not. Even after the efforts to find him were called off, the Collier County Sheriff's Office confirmed that the missing persons report on him was still active in case of any updates. Records revealed that Cross's wife filed for divorce the same day he disappeared, but there's no evidence to suggest foul play. He left behind 3 children, who now have to grapple with not knowing what happened to their father or where he ended up. 2. An unexplained leap. 23-year-old Charles Hughes Crooks was co-piloting a small plane over North Carolina one day in 2022 when he botched a landing attempt, forcing the plane to divert to another airport in the emergency. The pilot in command then took the controls. While en route to Raleigh-Durham International Airport, Crooks became noticeably upset, according to the pilot. He opened a window and then lowered the ramp at the back of the plane, indicating that he needed air and was perhaps just sick to his stomach. Crooks got out of his seat, removed his headset, calmly apologized to the pilot, and then fell out of the aircraft with no parachute at 3,500 feet up in the sky. Air traffic controllers were shocked by this, but they knew there was no way the young aviator could have survived a fall from that high. His remains were soon found in someone's backyard. Crooks's actions raised a lot of questions. Even though he seemed upset by the failed landing, it was a stretch to think someone in their right mind would take their life over it. An investigation discovered that he most likely didn't jump out of the plane, but that he probably just fell while leaning over to vomit from the open ramp. No drugs or alcohol were in his system at the time, and while the pilot initially reported that Crooks jumped, the findings determined that this was unlikely. 1. Bizarre family vacation. One night in October of 2022, residents in Fremont, Michigan saw an elderly woman wandering the street alone and called the police. She had left the home she shared with her daughter, 51-year-old Suzette Sirigliano, Suzette's husband, Anthony, and the couple's 2 teenage boys. The Siriglianos were not at the house though, and it was unlike them to leave Suzette's mother by herself, knowing she had dementia and needed full-time care. They also left their pets behind. At least one family member left a cell phone and they were all unreachable. Shortly before they disappeared, Anthony placed a strange 911 call, stating that he needed police protection immediately and wanted to speak with a police officer as well as US authorities. He mentioned the 9/11 attacks and said he had to discuss something of vital national interest. Anthony feared someone wanted to erase him from the face of the earth and insisted he wasn't crazy. He also made several other paranoid statements. Officers visited the family after the call and ultimately determined Anthony's questionable mental health wasn't putting him or his family at risk. He had no history of issues, and the Siriglianos were known for being an average, friendly family, making the case even more shocking. Nearly a week after vanishing, the family was found safe over 450 miles away in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. A gas station manager who saw them in Gulliver, Wisconsin, told the US Sun that one of the teens asked to use a phone but couldn't figure out how to operate it. She said that she didn't think the other members of the family knew he was trying to call someone, and she didn't know who he was trying to reach or even why. Police interviewed the family and learned that they all thought people were after them, but determined they didn't meet the required criteria for protective custody. Authorities closed the case and declined to charge the Siriglianos for leaving Suzette's mother behind after determining that they meant no actual harm. The reasons for their abrupt departure and the strange circumstances leading up to their disappearance remain unclear and foggy at best. Thanks for watching. Would you rather catch a stranger living in your crawl space or suffer from a bout of amnesia for a week? Let us know in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.